I'm going through the beloved Studio Ghibli movie catalog on Max, trying to see if I, as a first-time viewer, will appreciate these movies as much as people who grew up with them. I started with Kiki's Delivery Service, and then moved on to a very polarizing one, Tales from Earthsea, which I'll be reviewing today. I'm Troy for Marks on Anime, and today I'm reviewing the film Tales from Earthsea by Studio Ghibli. Now, on to the story. Before getting into my actual review, I took a peek at some other YouTube videos about this film, wondering if I was alone in how I felt. Come to find out, I'm actually about to be far more charitable than most. People really did not like this movie, even diehard fans of Studio Ghibli. The author of the book series that this movie is based on, Ursula K. Le Guin, may have hated this more than anyone. She says that she felt somewhat betrayed by Studio Ghibli because she was always hesitant to allow her books to be adapted for the big screen, but then she saw My Neighbor Totoro and decided that Hayao Miyazaki was the only person that she would trust to make this movie. Then, Hayao claimed that he would be retiring and instead entrusted Tales from Earthsea to his son, Goro. Hayao even hated this movie so much that he walked out of theaters midway through, saying that Goro wasn't ready. Ursula says that upset her, and then she felt betrayed when Hayao came out of retirement years later for another movie. She also said that watching this movie was like watching a completely different story from hers, with characters that just so happened to share the same names as some of her book series characters. She did say, however, that she thinks that the movie is good, it's just not her story, and that upsets her. As a writer myself, I can definitely sympathize with that. But either way, let's get to my review, and yes, there are spoilers for the entire film's plot. As I mentioned, this movie was actually based on the first 4 books of Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series. The books covered in the movie were A Wizard of Earthsea, The Tombs of Atuan, The Farthest Shore, and Tehanu. They throw you right into 2 conflicts, one about dragons returning and for some reason choosing to fight each other, and another about a sickness going across the land. Right away, the characters from the kingdom of Enlid are left somewhat ambiguous about whether we should be rooting for or against them. Don't worry, nothing I've said so far plays into the rest of the film. Weird, I know. Either way, we now see our main character, a young boy, who runs up and stabs the king, stealing his sword.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
They do a good job of showing the odd land layout of Earthsea and building the viewer's expectations for the world's layout. However, travel times are sort of ambiguous. We've seen many different landscapes so far, and just within the first 10 minutes of the movie, they don't spend a lot of time dragging you through a ton of backstory or exposition. With 4 books worth of material to cover, that's not a shock.
Keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
And much like a lot of anime fantasy films during this time period, they kind of just throw you in and let you figure it out as the movie goes on. Details about important characters and the world trickle out throughout the film, like most wizards and sorcerers have given up their powers or have lost them. Also, something is wrong with the world of Earthsea, but no one is quite sure what it is.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
The boy who killed the king, Aaron, goes to the big city with a wizard that he runs into named Sparrowhawk. Timothy Dalton actually voices Sparrowhawk. That's probably the coolest part of this film. They get separated when Aaron has to save a young girl, Teru, from some soldiers, one of whom is voiced by Cheech Marin, another fun fact. The soldiers later jump Aaron from behind, cause him to lose the dead king's sword, and they take Aaron as a slave, but Aaron is later saved by Sparrowhawk and brought back to a farm with Teru and Tenar. Aaron has some disturbing nightmares that we'll learn about later.
Have you ever had a dream that you could...
We also find out that Sparrowhawk is being hunted by an evil wizard named Cobb, voiced by Willem Dafoe, probably the second best thing about this movie. It's around this time that we find out that Sparrowhawk is the most powerful mage in all of Earthsea. When he goes into town alone, Aaron goes after him and gets haunted by his nightmares during the day. Cobb, the wizard that's after Sparrowhawk, saves Aaron and attempts to poison his mind against Sparrowhawk. Meanwhile, the soldiers show up and abduct Tenar to send a message to Sparrowhawk. When Sparrowhawk is told of this, he goes after Tenar. Sparrowhawk and Cobb meet, and Cobb says that he's done research to become immortal and open the door between death and life. Aaron has been corrupted at this point, being told that Sparrowhawk is purposely keeping the secret to immortality from him, so he attacks Sparrowhawk until the Archmage saves Aaron, bringing him back to reality.
Snap out of it!
Sparrowhawk says that he's growing weaker in Cobb's castle as he ends up getting abducted and thrown into the dungeon with Tanar. Taking a quick pause here, I think that Sparrowhawk got weaker in Cobb's castle because of some magic being put on the castle that would weaken him. As far as Aaron, we eventually find out that he's scared to die and he's fighting against death, but he's a young child, so we're not exactly why this has come up in his mind, and we're not told exactly why he should care so much about immortality at his age. It's just kind of left somewhat ambiguous, at least it was to me.
I'm extremely confused.
Back to the review. Back at the farm, Teru was given the Dead King's lost sword by Sparrowhawk when he had showed up earlier, who found it back in town.
I've been busy today.
She decided to go to Cobb's castle as well, and runs into Aaron's shadow nightmare, which looks just like Aaron.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
He guides Teru to the castle and directs her to kill Cobb to save him. Before she goes in, the Shadow, who represents Aaron's fear of death, says that his true name is Lebanon, and the Dead King's sword actually belongs to his father. We find out nothing more about that. Was the guy that he killed his father, or did that king steal that sword from Lebanon's real father? Don't know.
I have several questions.
When Teru finds Aaron in the castle, she tells him that his fear of death is keeping him from truly living. She then tells him that she knows his true name before saying that her true name is Tahanu. I guess she's some sort of dragon that keeps the gate between death and life.
I get it.
I don't get it.
To be honest, this part was a bit confusing for me as well. They embrace and go off to find Tanar and Sparrowhawk, who is about to be made by Cobb to swan dive off a castle wall.
Hey, don't do this, Jim! No! Oh my God!
When Cobb attempts to cast a spell on Aaron to kill him, Aaron draws his sword and breaks the spell before cutting off Cobb's hand and forcing him to drop his staff. This ages Cobb, and Sparrowhawk tells us that Cobb is only kept alive by magic. Cobb kidnaps Teru, and Aaron chases them through the castle. Aaron tries to make Cobb accept death as he accepted life, but Cobb resists. He attempts to kill Teru, but she comes back to life as Tahanu and sends Cobb into the afterlife before going full dragon. That's not a metaphor either.
Jesus Christ.
Teru eventually goes back to being a girl and lives again with Aaron, Tanar, and Sparrowhawk for a bit on the farm. However, Aaron says that he's going back to Enlid to answer for his crimes. Sparrowhawk goes with him, and the film ends.
Play me off, Johnny!
I'm going to be real honest with you about this film. The art was beautiful, the voice acting was superb, and the atmosphere was rich. I probably would have been more interested in this as a kid, and admittedly, this is a movie targeted at a younger demographic than 32-year-old men. So I'm taking that into account. But at the same time, this was very long and quite boring.
I will only see it 3 more times. Today.
There were bits of action here and there, and the themes were pretty deep and thoughtful, and it made for a slog at times. There was a lot of discussion in the film about the meaning of life, fighting against death, finding ways to be immortalized, loving others, and loving yourself. These are worthwhile messages, but I'm not sure that this was the best story for those messages. I feel like Cobb wasn't seen as much as maybe he could have been, or maybe we could have gotten just a bit more backstory during his screen time, rather than a quick 30-second conversation between him and Sparrowhawk, and then the quick bit about him being kept alive by magic. Cobb, and obviously Aaron's shadow, represent lives wasted trying to avoid death. However, Aaron eventually realizes that he has potential in life and becomes a hero. Meanwhile, Cobb never does, and is overtaken by his fear and anger, only to succumb to death as everyone eventually does. I can respect the messages and representations as well as the artwork and voice acting. However, at the end of the day, this was a fairly boring film. This isn't a defense or criticism of the movie, but it's just a fact that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this review, this film is based off of 4 books. That would explain the nearly 2 hours of runtime. But if you're adapting 4 books of any genre, especially an epic fantasy series, into films, you're just not going to do that in 2 hours. I know that was pretty much the standard for the 80s and most of the 90s, but tons of important stuff will be left out by necessity, and the film will feel both rushed while also empty and a bit boring. I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend watching Tales of Earthsea on Max, but I also wouldn't suggest avoiding it. It's a halfway decent watch that I tried to do some justice for with this review. Comment down below, what do you all think of Tales from Earthsea? Have you read the books? Do you hate the film as much as most people do? Do you actually really like it? Or are you more in the middle, like me? Also, tell me what Studio Ghibli film I should set my sights on next. I'm currently watching Howl's Moving Castle. Let me know your suggestions down in the comments. Also, please share this video around to everyone you know, and don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that little bell to be notified every time we post brand new content. I've been Troy from Marks on Anime, and we'll see you next time.